For years, I've had a relationship with folks who listen to the show, startup founders, venture capitalists, but also folks in the C-suites at tech companies, large and small, including Magnificent Seven companies. So this weekend, I reached out to some of those executives with one simple question. If these tariffs hold, what is the plan? Eat the tariffs or pass them on to consumers? What's the thinking here? This is what they told me. None of them said they were going to raise prices. For now. But not out of any sort of altruistic impulse, more out of a cover-your-butt impulse. In short, nobody wants to be seen as going first and being accused of, as one of them put it, sabotaging the project. Another person used the example of Apple to say if Apple came out tomorrow and announced the iPhone was starting at $1,600, quote, Trump would bring holy hellfire down on them. In short, everyone will attempt to hold down prices as long as they can, A, to hope this blows over, but more importantly, B, not to make themselves a target. Though another person told me this could all be a moot point. They pointed out that there are other sectors like auto manufacturers or aircraft builders for whom this could become an existential issue quickly. If the choice is between raising prices and going out of business, you raise prices, cross your fingers, and pray. So the point there is that if other sectors have to raise prices en masse, that would be the time when tech would raise prices because they'd have cover. One person was more sanguine than I anticipated because even though the Chinese have already taken retaliatory actions, they thought other countries might wait a while to raise tariffs themselves because the hope would be that the stock market crash would force the administration's hand to do some sort of reversal. If other countries can take some short-term pain, they might do so in hopes they never have to raise tariffs themselves because markets would avert a full-blown trade war for them. But several of them mentioned that essay I did a couple weeks ago about sovereign tech stacks and the danger of the world decoupling from Silicon Valley. Brian, one person told me, you know how everybody has been shifting their supply chains away from China because they wanted to mitigate the risk of being caught in a trade war? Why won't countries do the same to us? Sure, if it ends up being a global trade war, that's a moot point. But even if this all gets resolved quickly, people now have the fear that trading with the U.S. is an iffy proposition. Lots of people using the phrase, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. But also lots of people mentioning that it's not just one supply chain that could break. It's that the whole global supply chain is so interconnected, it kind of is one single supply chain, as we saw in COVID times. One person used the analogy of NVIDIA chips, and I realize this is not a perfect analogy for a lot of reasons, but go with this for a second. Let's say you're somebody looking to get your hands on the latest top-of-the-line AI chips. Let's say you temporarily get sent to the back of the line because of tariffs. And so those chips go to companies in other countries because it's easier, even if the tariffs blow over. Do you get your place back in line, or are you stuck at the back of the line? Not picking on Apple again, but to use them as a different imperfect analogy. As someone pointed out, Apple and everyone else signs long, multi-year forward-looking contracts. Now, TSMC, say, isn't going to break contracts with the likes of Apple. But if you're a small hardware manufacturer and all your supply chain is overseas and it's too expensive for your suppliers to do business with you, or you're unable to deliver the volume you promised, they will break their contracts and you're dead. In fact, one person said the supply chain breaking alone could reap a whirlwind. They said, Wall Street always worries in times like this that some hedge fund blows up or some bank blows up and margin calls and stuff, which lead to a recession or worse. But this person said, again, COVID times taught us there can be singular pinch points in the global supply chain that can break under stress. Remember, these are folks who sell gadgets that have a supply chain of like 40 different countries. I saw this echoed a lot on social media this morning, the fear that some supplier you've never heard of suddenly goes bankrupt, but whoopsie. It turns out that company supplies 90% of the world with some part or component or mineral or whatever that it turns out is absolutely vital to the global supply chain. Whoopsie. And then there's just the fear of recession. Even if the president declares victory next week and reverses the tariffs, until that point, what are all of us doing, this person said? We're hitting pause. Just look at what Nintendo did with the Switch. You think they want to pause the key driver of how they had mapped out their next 10 years? And what's the definition of what causes a recession when everybody pauses or pulls back at the same time? So lots of fear of a recession of some form is baked in already. Again, these are not my opinions. I'm just telling you what I heard from some of the very plugged in people who work in Silicon Valley who listen to the show every day. If you want to be one of those Silicon Valley whisperers for me, get in touch anytime at brian@techmeme.com. The deal I've always made with folks is you don't have to give me scoops about your company or what you're doing. I'm more interested in vibes, what people are really thinking in the background. And it's all on background, as you saw with this essay.